Previously, on Night of the Serpent, the tabaxi splashes into the water. The turtle's jaws close around the dwarf, and satisfied with this meal, the turtle begins to sink. Heck, from above, watches helplessly as the shell disappears beneath the surface and out of laser beam range. Meanwhile, 13 scrabbles and slashes and starts to drown. Gûlwyf strikes the inside of the turtle's mouth with her hammer, and the jaws pop open. Injured and dissatisfied, the turtle sinks away into deeper water. Then 13 wraps their arms around Gûlwyf, and the two of them begin to sink. Gûlwyf is struggling to reach the surface, but rolling at disadvantage with 13's added weight, cannot seem to get their head above water. And then 13 rolls a natural 20. Springing off of the dwarf, the tabaxi manages to pull themselves ashore, and free from the added burden, Gûlwyf can rescue themselves. Crisis averted. On the 12th day, as they continue to slog through the Aldani Basin, the heroes see a floating heart of stone many, many miles away, far over the jungle. The exact same heart of stone that populates the Bard's nightmares. They briefly debate the merits of detouring to go investigate this site, but Eku, their guide, urges them to continue on to Mbala and stop the source of the dream plague. Later that day, the heroes encounter the severed torso of a slain adventurer, and the strange footprints and the stranger feathers convince Heck that this is the work of the King in Feathers, his legendary quarry. On the 13th day, the party wades through waist-high silt, and that night, as they camp, they encounter a passing flail snail that, when threatened, flashes them once with its mesmeric, scintillating shell. On the 14th day, they depart the swamp and cross through the monkey-decorated ruins of Mbala. Eku relays the story of Raznisi, an ancient warlord at the head of an undead army, of the conquest and devastation he brought to Mbala, and how present-day Mbala is nothing more than a village squatting in the ruins of a great city of antiquity. On the 15th day, when they awaken in the morning, they discover that their guide has disappeared, and all that remains of Eku is a pile of her shriveled skin, as though she burst out of it like a chrysalis. Inexplicably on their own, and with no idea what happened to Eku, the heroes of Red Bazaar have no choice but to mount the crumbling plateau of Mbala. The plateau is a monument from another age, covered in ancient carvings and crumbled architecture. Its once magnificent road, winding around and around and around the cliff faces, is now a treacherous path beset by pitfalls. There's loose scree and tree roots and scattered boulders and toppled statuary. After hours and hours of climbing, the heroes of Red Bazaar are exhausted and lay down to rest on the mountainside. Without Eku's aid, however, they are haunted once again by their nightmares, this time worsened by the presence of a cackling purple-skinned figure who torments them in their sleep. When they awaken, both 13 and Gûlwyf have gotten no benefit from their rest, and are indeed weaker, some of their life essence drained away. As the only one unaffected, Heck volunteers for a scouting mission to fly to the top of the plateau and survey the remaining dangers. He flaps up to the summit of the plateau and spies the spread of a ruined city, and within the ruins of that city, a small ruined village, and within that village, a thin wisp of smoke rising from the single standing hut. Then, as he's descending, he's attacked by a horde of flying monkeys. These are horrific baboon-like beasts, nothing like the cute pistachio that once they knew in Port Nyanzaru. Their forms are warped and twisted, and their shrieks inspire terror. Heck, though, fights bravely, manages to drive the swarm away, and swoops back down to warn his companions. Deciding it's better to move, even in the dead of night, they strike their camp and continue their ascent to the summit. With Heck taking point, they manage to navigate several more dangers before, in the pre-dawn light, they're attacked by 2 swarms of flying monkeys. In the opening rounds of the combat, the weakened 13 is knocked unconscious, and several monkeys take hold of them, lifting the tabaxi up into the air. Gûlwyf is mobbed by enemies, flapping and scratching at her, and so cannot lend any aid. With the sun rising behind him, only Heck can come to the rescue. This is enough to drive away the rest of the monkeys, and after a short rest, the wounded, exhausted, and demoralized heroes reach the gates of Mbala. What should they find there? But a glistening heap of human skulls. And that's where we stopped. How did the session go? Let's talk about it. I have this theory that every third session is always the best session, and this was definitely one of those. We got to talk about some history in this episode, which I thought was cool. The name Rosnisi got dropped for the first time. We got to walk through the ruins of Mbala, which is a little detail that I added. They saw the heart of Ubtao at a distance, but I think it really helps solidify this sense that Chult is a consistent place with long-standing history and set up kind of the three different epochs when Ubtao was still alive, after Ubtao fell and Rosnisi reigned, and the present day, post the disappearance of Rosnisi. There was also a really great little hint of the King in Feathers. Jay had literally just been talking about it, 5 minutes before they stumbled across the corpse. It was just super serendipitous timing, which I really appreciated. The flail snail was a great little anti-encounter. We've had a few of these. It's one of the things I like the most about the design of Tomb of Annihilation, is that you encounter monsters, but you don't necessarily fight them all the time. The way I had reasoned it, that the flail snail was just passing through, and it was moving straight towards their camp. You could only see its shell above the sludge that's moving along. And the characters were sort of faced with this question, do we attack this thing? Do we just move our camp? What do we do? Just another fun, memorable little 10 minutes that happened in the game. I have to confess, I was really looking forward to Echo's disappearance, not just for the shock factor, but also because I was getting a little bit tired of dragging her around. Coatls, by their nature, can't lie. They're sort of truth speakers, but they also go around disguised all the time. So it got to be, I think, a little tedious to have the characters constantly questioning her and trying to figure her out. But then at the same time, the minute that they discovered her identity, they were constantly asking her questions about what happened here and why is this and why is that? Does Echo know anything about this? Well, Echo's 1,000 years old. Doesn't Echo know? That kind of stuff. And especially going into Mbala, the last thing I wanted was the characters dragging around this expert on the city's history and the threats and the villain that they're about to meet. So I thought it was a nice moment to creep the party out with the weird skin peeling, right? And then also make them feel extra threatened that they were heading into this place that she recommended they go, but they didn't have any information. They hadn't asked her the right questions. The main thrust of the adventure I knew would be climbing the plateau. In the book, it's just presented as something that takes 3 hours, but I wanted to mechanize it a little bit and add a little bit of extra danger. And ironically, it became extremely dangerous. And that was one of my favorite things about this adventure. Mechanically, they needed to get 5 successes before 3 failures. I didn't actually think it was going to be that difficult, but they just had a run of bad luck, and the number of skills that they're proficient in that could actually help them is relatively small. Unlike most skill challenges where there's a time pressure involved, I had to introduce a different consequence if they achieved 3 failures, and in this case, I gave them a level of exhaustion. So in the first ascent, they get 3 successes and then eventually 3 failures, and they fail. They get a level of exhaustion, they decide they'll stop and they'll rest. There's no time pressure, which is a good point. But that's when my trap springs. You see, there's a night hag waiting for them in the ruins of Mbala, my version of Nanny Poo-Poo. Her flying monkey spies keep her abreast of the party's movements, and once they fall asleep, she goes ethereal, creeps down into their camp, and troubles their nightmares. Each character made a wisdom saving throw against her predations, and those that failed don't gain any benefit from their rest, and they lose a certain number of hit points from their maximum. Now, that's not normally how a night hag works. They normally can only target one person, but it's an auto-fail. They automatically gain no rest, and they automatically lose those hit points. So I like the idea of it affecting everyone, but wanted to give everyone a chance to succeed. But of course, 2 characters failed, the paladin and the bard, leaving only the monk to survive. So now the characters are exhausted, they have few hit points, and they can't really rest to get rid of their level of exhaustion. They can take short rests and spend their hit dice, but they're only 4th level, they don't have that many hit dice left. So all of a sudden, climbing Mbala becomes this very dangerous proposition. This was also the first session when I got to introduce the dream folders. So whenever the characters take a long rest in Night of the Serpent, they're troubled by these same nightmares. For the first time, I was able to pass out these folders, each one of which just has a little bit of text inside that describes their dream. Their instructions are, whenever they sleep, to take out that document and read it. Even if they've read it before, even if they know what it says, the idea is they have to re-experience it every single time. So when they were sleeping on Mbala, I actually added in some new text that described Nanny Poo-Poo's attempts to manipulate their nightmares. It was really fun to watch the players take their folder and trepidatiously open it and read it, and give each other glances. Heck going scouting was one of the great narrative moments of the adventure. He had proposed it right away from the very beginning, saying, I can fly up there, why don't I just scout out the city? But the party didn't really want to split up, and so we let it go. Then, once Gûlwyf and 13 had failed their saving throws, he thinks, well, I'm the only one who could still do this, so he flies up and does a scouting mission. He flies up, he gets some information, but then of course, he's jumped by the flying monkeys. The flying monkeys I did as a swarm, and I actually designed them on stream, but because it was an ambush, and because he was alone, and because they have a fear effect, Jay was terrified of these things. He was jumping for the rest of the session, constantly worried that they were going to provoke more attacks, and when the second attack did come, he had to kind of like, oh, I knew it, which was very, very satisfying, especially for kind of a throwaway monster. For me, the highlight of the entire session was probably that last combat. 13 is unconscious, they failed 2 death saving throws, and 3 flying monkeys are carrying them away. Gûlwyf can't do anything as they're off the ground, and it's pretty clear that if the monkeys continue to fly away, 13 is going to die. And everyone was kind of coming to terms with this idea that Kay's character was going away forever and they would have to come up with a new character. But then Hex swoops into action. He deals enough damage to the swarm to kill the 3 monkeys that are carrying 13 away. But then I described that 13 is going to fall 15 feet to the ground, take 2d6 damage, and automatically fail their last saving throw and die. So I offer Heck the opportunity to use his reaction to make a dexterity saving throw to swoop in and catch 13 before they fall. Jay jumps at the chance, rolls it, barely succeeds, and manages to take the damage for 13 instead of the other way around, so 13 survived. We ended the session with, I think, a pretty decent cliffhanger, the heaps of skulls outside of Mbala. That's one of my favorite things in D&D, is to introduce creepy but ultimately non-threatening imagery. They're going to have to wade through these skulls to get into the city at the beginning of next session. They're currently convinced that there are undead in the city, the remnants of Rosnisi's attack, but you and I know better. Thanks for watching previously on. We'll be back next week with the next adventure. We're actually playing a double this week because we've been off for a little bit, so there may be 2 episodes. I may combine them into 1, depending on what happens. How would you have run this adventure? Do you have any questions about how the session went, or where the campaign's going, or how to design skill challenges? Feel free to leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, happy adventuring.